Thank you so much for coming out, and definitely thank you for coming out today. It's just a tad bit brisk, I would say, but, but you are here, and we are so happy to have you here. My name is Evelyn Ellis. I am the Vice President of Institutional Diversity and Equity, and I am also your host today. We have one slight change in the program. We will not have the rockapellas. I think they're frozen over. But we will carry on even though they are not here. Now you are joining us in the 18th year of the Social Justice Awards. They were established back in 2002 by the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee. And it's a diverse membership from a variety of departments all over Dartmouth College. The awards were established to recognize alumni, faculty, staff, and student groups for the commitment they show to the causes of social justice, civil rights, peace, education, public health, or environmental justice. This year's Social Justice Awards are co-sponsored by the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration, the Office of Institutional Diversity and Equity, and the Dartmouth Center for Social Impact. The evening begins right away, actually, with me giving some opening remarks, and then we get to give out the awards. Now, for the people who have been here for a while, and we have a lot of newbies, so this is going to be interesting. What time is it now? Story time. There you go. She gets the A. If you're new, this is the time each year during these awards, and it's called Ellis Family Story Time. This is when I connect my family history to the history of these awards, to your family history, and to the history of Dartmouth. Some years ago, I listened to a recording of a sermon, and the sermon was being given by a visiting pastor who was speaking at the Olivet Baptist Church in Fayetteville, Georgia. He delivered a sobering reminder of our failure as descendants of African slaves to tell their children how we got into slavery, how we got out of slavery, and how we got beyond the vestiges of bondage. As often as I replay that recording, I am continuously amazed at how right that pastor was at the time of the sermon and how true his words are now. As we suffer through day after day of negative messages from people across this country and now people across the world about who people of color actually are, I am even more concerned with our neglect to tell our children our story. I think it's high time we fill that void, fill it in the minds of our children and children all over the world with the true story of who the descendants of slaves really are, for wherever they come, whoever they are, and wherever they're going. If we fail to do that, someone else, as that pastor said, someone else will tell them our story, a story they want them to hear, and it will not be our story at all. So in June of 2018, I made my annual pilgrimage to Georgia and to Alabama to heal with my family. It was very hot during my visit, as it always is when I travel down in the summer. My sister Yolanda, who is a member of that Olivet Baptist Church that I was in, had planned a perfect journey for me and for my daughter Julia. We would drive from Hale County in Alabama through Marion County and into Selma, Alabama. If you don't know those places, please Google them. We parked the car on the business side of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and carrying my brother Kenny's re-election sign for sheriff of Hale County, we walked over that bridge of history. If you haven't done it yet, please reward yourself with the privilege. My job was to carry the big sign, and it's a big sign. Julia, my daughter, her job was to film the crossing, and my sister Yolanda's job was to avoid the panic attack she has with hikes. So we all had our job. As we walked, I looked down at the Alabama River. I looked back at the city of Selma, and I looked ahead at the green trees far in the distance. All of a sudden, I wondered if I would be the one having the panic attacks instead of Yolanda. I could hear footsteps of slaves marching south, north. I could hear police clubs crashing bodies of marchers. I could feel the pain of slaves working in fields in Alabama and all over the South. It was as if my physical body, my own nervous system, if they were remembering the journey of my people. Maybe medical scientists are correct. Our cells remember. When we crossed over the bridge, people honked their horns, they smiled, they waved, and some just looked on, wondering why were we crossing the Pettus Bridge in nearly 100-degree weather. Well, we were telling our children our story. And walking across that bridge, we told Julia our story. Every child who saw us witnessed some of our story. We reminded ourselves and we reminded others that we have a story in this country that is both grim, but it is also inspiring. We want our own story. We want to own our own story. And every time we have the opportunity, and you have the opportunity, help our children learn that story. Our honorees tonight have stories. We get to share these stories with them. Their stories become a part of our stories. And we pull each other up higher simply by sharing our journeys. Now the sharing will begin with the awarding of the 2019 Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Social Justice Awards. And please help me welcome all of our honorees. Good enough.
Hi, I'm Doug Weiss, president of the class of 1959. And it's with we're very grateful to Dartmouth College and the Center for Social Impact for recognizing the class of 1959 as a recipient of the Lester B. Granger Award for Lifetime Achievement. As we understand, the award recognizes leadership and innovation in meeting community needs and benefiting underserved populations. It is with utmost appreciation and honor that I accept this award on behalf of the great class, Dartmouth class of 1959. Thank you.
Now we will give out the individual awards. In doing that, we will have another member of the class of 1959 come and sit with the panel, because at the end of all of their presentations, we get to talk to them. The Social Justice Awards originally conceived to honor members of our community with a venue that we may acknowledge and reflect on their accomplishments. They are presented tonight in the following categories: the Holly Thayer Award, the Martin Luther King Jr. Social Justice Awards in two areas, ongoing commitment and lifetime achievement, and the fourth one is the Dartmouth Center for Social Impact, Lester B. Granger Class of 18 Award for Lifetime Achievement. Each recipient will receive a clock that is there, and we remind all the recipients, if you are flying, do not take the clock with you. Even if you put it in your checked baggage, because it will cause a problem. Thank you, Kara. On the clock is the engraving of Dartmouth Hall. The gift of a clock is inspired by a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., the letter from a Birmingham jail that says, "We must use time creatively in the knowledge that time is always ripe to do right." The presentation of the awards will be followed by a conversation with our honorees about their lives, about their careers, working for social justice. I'll read a short, now they have long bios, so I made it as short as I could, so forgive me, a short introduction of each winner and have them join me at the table. I will introduce, tell you about the person, they will come to the table, they have to be by themselves just for a little bit while the other people join them, but you will make them feel really, really comfortable. We're delighted that the Holly Thayer Thayer Award this year is being awarded to Professor Bruce Dutu. Professor Bruce Dutu is the Sampson Ocken Professor and the former chair of Native American Studies here at Dartmouth, an internationally recognized scholar of Native American law and policy. Professor Dutu joined the Faculty of Arts and Sciences in Dartmouth in 2008, the same year that I arrived, Bruce. He earned his BA degree in religion and Native American Studies from Dartmouth College and his JD degree from Loyola University of Law in New Orleans. And then prior to joining the Dartmouth faculty, Bruce was professor of law at Vermont Law School, where he also served as the law school's vice dean for academic affairs and the inaugural director of the VLS Sun Yat-sen University Partnership in Environmental Law in China. He served as visiting professor of law at Harvard Law School and the universities of Wollongong and Sydney in New South Wales, Australia, and the University of Trento in northern Italy, an underachiever. Professor Dutu is the author of several books and was a contributing author of Felix S. Cohen's Handbook of Federal Indian Law, the leading treaty in the field of federal Indian law. He co-produced the documentary feature film, Dawnland, 2018, that focuses on state removal of Indian children from their families. Professor Dutu is an enrolled tribal member of the United Homa, Nation of Louisiana. Please join me in a round of applause for Bruce while he gets to sit at the table by himself for a bit. The Martin Luther King Social Justice Award for ongoing commitment. This year, we are delighted to present the award for ongoing commitment to Michele Duster. Michele Duster is an author, speaker, educator. She believes it is essential that the contributions of women and African Americans made to the United States be told in a more complete and accurate way. She is active with various local and national projects, committees and organizations that create, document, and promote the many untold stories. In the last dozen years, Michele's writing has been included in 9 books. She co-edited Shifts, an anthology of women's growth through change. She co-wrote the popular children's history book, Tate and His Historic Dream, plus wrote and edited 2 books that include the writings of her great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, Ida in her own words, an Ida from abroad. Her most recent book that she co-edited is Michelle Obama's Impact on African American Women and Girls. She was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. She earned her BA in psychology from Dartmouth College, where there was a chapter, she was a chapter member of Xi Lambda chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and a DJ on WDCR. I hope you all got to hear when you were here. She earned her MA in Media Studies from the New School in New York City. She currently teaches business writing at Columbia College, Chicago, and is working on several books projects that will be completed within the next 2 years. Please help me welcome Michele. And Bruce, you are no longer alone. On to our next award. The next award is the Martin Luther King Jr. Social Justice Award for Lifetime Achievement. In recognition of his legacy of service, I will now present the award for Lifetime Achievement to Dr. Ray Blackwell. Dr. Ray Blackwell is a graduate of Dartmouth College class of 1980. We're on a roll. In the Geisel School of Medicine, 1987. Anyone 1987? And he also will graduate. This is interesting. He will graduate from Wilder University, Delaware Law School in 2019. He had nothing else to do. He's currently the chief of cardiac surgery and surgical director of the Mechanical Circulatory Support Program at Christiana Care Health Services in Newark, Delaware. Dr. Blackwell has dedicated his life to service to others. As a medical student, he served on the Minority Admissions Subcommittee and later became a regional recruiter for the college and medical school. He was a student in a Better Chance program, which places underprivileged and underrepresented students in better academic environments and remain active in the organization. He is a co-founder of Association of Black Cardiovascular and Thoracic Surgeons, whose mission is to support and develop ongoing and practicing cardiothoracic surgeons. Dr. Blackwell has provided many mentoring opportunities for local and regional underrepresented college and medical school students. He has served as the co-chair of the Christian Care, Diversity, and Inclusion and Health Equity Committees, and has resided as chairperson of the Blood Pressure Ambassadors Program since its inception. This program addresses hypertension in the African American community through the use of community ambassadors. To date, over 10,000 lives have been touched. Dr. Blackwell is also active with Gamma Theta Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, having initially joined through the Theta Zeta chapter at Dartmouth College. Please help me welcome Dr. Blackwell. Now I get to award the Granger Award. I am pleased to present the Dartmouth Center for Social Impact Lester B. Granger Class of 18 Award to the Dartmouth Class of 1959 for their work with Dartmouth Partners in Community Service. Tonight, we have Doug Weiss, the class president, who you heard from earlier, and DPCS founders Carl Hochschuh and Michael Stern, here to present their class. Carl will join us at the panel discussion, but let me tell you a little bit about the class of 1959. Just some stats for you, over 800 nonprofit interns, 300,000 hours of service to the community, valued at over $7 million. Even I know that's money. Hundreds of alumni. Those stats, these impressive figures, help tell the story of the immense impact the Dartmouth class of 1959 have made through their class project, the Dartmouth Partners in Community Services. Founded in 1994, class members Carl Holtshoot and Michael Stern, and supported by numerous other class members and their spouses, very supportive spouses. I met some of them today. Dartmouth Partners in Community Service, which I will use DPCS most of the time from now on, engages undergraduates in transformative internships that provide meaningful services to agencies and allow students to explore important issues of social justice and service. As a project of the Center for Social Impact, DPCS's primary goal is to educate the next generation of leaders for the common good. DPCS partners with agencies, alumni, and the college to tackle important issues in the community while helping students develop the attitudes, the skills, and the knowledge they need to leave Dartmouth ready to make an impact and lead a life of community engagement. Through DPCS, the class of 1959 has created real change in the lives of students who go on to lead lives of service, and alumni who wield their talents and treasure for the common good. And in the agencies who have been able to tackle large projects and improve their work with the help of these interns. All of the members, if you're here and you're from the class of 1959, could you please stand so we can thank you? And Carl, you should not have sat down because you are coming to the panel. And this is how it will work from this point on. What we will do now is each panel member will have an opportunity to share with you. They'll share a bit about their background in social justice. And once they are finished, then we will engage all of them. So why don't we, Bruce, since you're sitting right here near me, why don't we start with you?
Okay. You said about 45 minutes or so?
He's a professor. No.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Evelyn and her team and to the all of you for joining us today to mark this occasion. And it's a deep honor for me to be receiving this award. A lot of folks to thank, but the two groups or individuals that I really want to thank are my wife, Hilda Ojibwe. Many of you know her. She's a force of nature and has been just the most inspiring person in my life. So thank you. And then my colleagues back there in Native American Studies. One of the main reasons that I made the shift from teaching at Vermont Law School to come back to my alma mater was to, as I said back then, to be working with people who had the concerns of Native peoples on the brain, who basically woke up every morning thinking about ways to advance the cause of justice for Native people. And there's no better place in the U.S. to do that kind of work than right here at Dartmouth. So I love you guys, so thank you. The only story I want to tell you is when did I first hear the phrase social justice. There is a moment in my life when I first heard that phrase, and it was here at Dartmouth with a young seminarian that I had befriended at St. Denis Church. As I shared with the group at lunch, when I came to Dartmouth back in 1976, I came with the aspiration of becoming ordained as a Catholic priest. In my upbringing in Louisiana, a very Catholic part of the state and the country, I had early models, examples of agents for social justice from within the church. I also had examples from the church that went the other direction as well. But the one that really stuck out for me was a priest who arrived in our area in the late 50s, early 60s, who was horrified when he was being given the tour of the church to see that there were bars nailed to the top of the pews in the church. When he asked the local council, the elites who were all white, what those bars were doing nailed to the top of the pews, he said he was told that's where the Indians sit. So there was segregation in the church. And he was horrified, so he took those bars off, loaded them in his station wagon, drove them to New Orleans, to the home of the Archbishop of New Orleans, deposited the bars in the driveway, and said to the Archbishop, if any of my parishioners ask where the bars are, I'm going to send them to you so you can explain why you allowed this to happen in God's church, because it's not going to happen in my church. And I just thought that was such a powerful story that I wanted that collar. I wanted to be able to fight the good fight, because at a young age, I had already seen a lot of other folks coming in, trying to fight for justice and not being able to do it, whether they were lawyers or social workers or politicians, teachers, etc. But this guy got something done. He shook up the social order. So that was very inspiring to me, and I thought, that's what I'll do. I'll be a priest, and I'll come back, and I'll shake up the world, at least my little corner of it, Louisiana. So I come here to Dartmouth with this idea, and I was going to St. Denis Church here in Hanover, and there happened to be this young Canadian seminarian named Marcel, who I became very close friends with, and we'd go off for walks and chat about my aspirations or my delusions in wanting to become a priest. And he asked me, he says, why do you want to become a priest? And I shared with him some of the stories, including the one I just shared with you. And he looked at me and he says, so you want to pursue social justice? And I said, yes. I've never heard that. I never heard those words put together, but that sounds exactly right. Tell me what that means. And so he did. And then afterwards he said, so why necessarily the priesthood? You can advance social justice in all kinds of ways. You don't have to be a priest to do that. And I thought on that for a while, and then that led me to make, at least to abandon the idea of the priesthood as a career. There was no plan B until much later, after Hilda and I were married. We were both married, we were both undergraduates. And I'll close my story with this. So in 1979, fall of 79, we were at one of these alumni gatherings, you know, where I call it the grand seduction dinners, where they bring alumni back, many like one of these wonderful folks here, and they discreetly plant undergraduates at each of the tables to tell their story and share their story with alums. And I think the idea is to get you all, you know, warm and fuzzy about Dartmouth and write a huge check. And as it happened, I was at a table with a lot of lawyers. So during dessert, when the inevitable question comes around, well, Bruce, what will you be doing after Dartmouth? And without missing a beat, I said, going to law school. And Hilda almost swallowed her spoon. The drive home that night was very quiet. And all she said was, so, had we been at the next table with all the doctors? Going to medical school. So, and then she said, isn't there a test you have to take, like, soon? And I said, yes, there's a lot of catching up to do, and I got on the ball and did the LSAT and all of that stuff and got into law school. But I can remember distinctly when the phrase social justice came into my vocabulary and into my consciousness, and really have tried to make that a real part of my life in the sense of trying to look back to the example that a lot of my relatives and friends from back home demonstrated without naming it, that these were people fighting for social justice, people doing the hard work, breaking barriers, challenging authority, bending the arc of justice in directions that include people marginalized, and just trying to do my role in that. And I've had a lot of guidance and assistance and teachings in that journey, and I hope to be able to do it for a few more years. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Michele?
Okay, I'm going to try my best to, you know, it's challenging if you have a bunch of professors and ask them to speak for 5 minutes. I'm going to try my best to stay within the time period. So we were given a couple of bullet points to sort of jar our thoughts about what we would talk about. I'll just briefly tell you my story. I am originally from Chicago. I grew up, born and raised on the south side of Chicago, which during the time that I was growing up and still today is predominantly black, as a result of white flight. When my parents moved into my neighborhood, we were one of the few black families on the block, and then about 5 years later, we were in the majority. So I experienced that, you know, flight of white people leaving our neighborhood. And so I grew up in a neighborhood and a culture where I was in the majority. I went to mostly segregated schools until around 6th grade, and then I started going to what were in Chicago was kind of an experiment of magnet schools. So from 6th grade all the way through high school, I went to integrated schools where still the black students were in the majority. So when I came to Dartmouth, it was culture shock for me. I wanted to be in an integrated environment, in a challenging academic environment, but when I came to Dartmouth, it was one of the first times in my life I had ever been questioned on how did you get here and why are you here, and being challenged on that my right to be somewhere. And I encountered several students in my experience at Dartmouth that had a lot of interesting sort of negative views about what Chicago was like. And like, oh, you're from the south side of Chicago. And they asked me questions that were based on a lot of stereotypes. And it made me wonder, how did they even get these ideas? Where does this come from if they've never been to Chicago before? If they've never met me before. They've never seen anything that I've experienced. Where are they getting this from? And I finally realized that they were getting it from the media. They were getting their ideas about where I was from based on what they saw on television and in movies. And so I just felt that images had such a strong impact on people's perceptions of things that they've never seen before. And so it made me want to change those images. And that has been the driving force of my career so far in the past few years. I started off in advertising. I ended up working on a couple of films. I've worked in corporate communications, marketing, media, everything I could think of that I thought would make a difference. And I kept being frustrated on how I could make some kind of an impact on how people viewed African Americans specifically, African American women specifically, because I just think it's dangerous to have messages that are very inaccurate. It impacts the way people interact with each other. It impacts policy. It impacts a lot of decisions. And so that has been my driving force. For the past 10 years, I got off the corporate band and I started writing my own work because I felt that the ideas that I had were not being listened to in the way that I felt were important enough to make the impact that I wanted to make. So I started writing my own work, self-published, because I didn't want to answer to anybody on the messages that I felt were important. I had worked long enough in the corporate environment to know that some of the attitudes that I would be facing with what I wanted to say. And I got to the point where I was like, I know what I'm doing enough, I can do it on my own. So it's been a big sacrifice financially, and there were moments where I felt like I was really crazy and why am I doing this to myself, because it's a very difficult road to take. But each step, one thing has led to another, and I didn't think what I was doing was social justice. I just felt like it was a way to help who I am be seen in this society in a truthful way. And I'm doing it in a lot of different ways.
Thank you. Thank you. And Ray, you will take it from Michele.
I will do my best. Big acts to follow. So first, I want to thank you and Dartmouth College for recognizing the work that has been done, both by my fellow awardees and myself. I have to thank my wife and my daughters, two of whom are here, one is not, because you probably figured out I have a lot of energy, and their job is to try and contain that energy. I also want to thank Dr. Hall, who's a fellow classmate who I believe had some hand in my being able to sit at this table, so thank you. Just a little bit about my story, which may be a little different. I'm the son of tobacco farmers. So I grew up in the Jim Crow South. I went to segregated schools until 1969. Heard about a program called The Better Chance, which placed highly motivated minority students in better academic environments. So at the age of 16, I left home and went to Glastonbury, Connecticut. As it turned out, the president, the vice president, and the treasurer of that program in Glastonbury were all Dartmouth graduates, which explains why I ended up here. So when I came to Dartmouth, and Bruce and I were in the same class, I learned a little bit about, we didn't call it social justice, but it was at the height of the symbol for Dartmouth, and it was the height of the apartheid controversy at Dartmouth, and so my eyes were open to a lot of injustices around the world. I live my dream every day. So when I was 10, I realized I wanted to be a cardiac surgeon. Right? I didn't know how I was going to get there, but over the years, people have allowed me to stand on their shoulders, and through social programs, here I am. Right? So I live my dream every day. Now, what can I do to pay those people back? I have to pay it forward. So, you know, we start out doing little projects, and over the years, one thing leads to another. Will I ever be able to do enough to pay them back? I don't know, but I won't stop trying. So Dartmouth sort of increased my awareness and sort of kept me on that path to helping people who can't help themselves, those people that are underrepresented and underfunded in college and medical school. The way I do, how do I maintain that? I think, you know, we go through life, and if we can change one person's life, we've made an impact. We've done something spectacular. I was in line to get my photograph taken a couple of weeks ago, and a young lady came up to me and she goes, "Dr. Blackwell," she goes, "you probably don't remember me, but I spent a day with you in the operating room." And she's now an attending physician at the hospital. I have impacted someone's life. I mean, how do you put a measurement on that? It's hard to do. But those moments make it all worthwhile. Social change is difficult. And if you ask me how do you maintain your passion, you have to understand that social change is slow, it's hard work, and if you take your foot off the pedal, it's gonna stop, right? So every day you have to be willing to step out and stand out and be different and address the issues that are at hand. Is it uncomfortable? Sure it is. Are you gonna get questioned, why are you here, and did you take someone else's position? It's inner fortitude that keeps you going every day, and you can never stop. I know my family thinks that I probably do too much, but I'm not sure I've done enough just yet. There's always something. There's always some other project that's going to come along, and you don't necessarily have to plan them. Opportunities fall at your feet, and you just have to be willing to take the courage, step up to the plate, and do what you can, and you can make a difference in someone else's life.
Thank you. Now, Carl, the ball's on your side of the court.
Well, I want to thank you for this award to the class of '59 and to me and Michael Stern as founders. The award is the Granger Award for Lifetime Achievement in Public Service. And the phrase lifetime achievement reminds me of Professor Al Foley's Vermont humor story that he used to tell. The New Yorker who said to the old-timer rocking on the porch of his farmhouse, "You have a beautiful place here. Have you lived here all your life?" And the farmer rocked and said, "Not yet." So we've spent almost 25 years with DPCS, but we're not finished. Let me give you a little background about how DPCS came to be. Michael learned about the program for our 35th reunion in 1995. He heard about it from the Princeton class of 55, where they started a public service program at their 35th reunion to help alumni give back. They'd all achieved things. It was time for them to give back. Project was approved by our class executive committee in '93, and I volunteered to serve as president of the alumni board of what we called Dartmouth Partners in Community Service. The partners were the college, the alumni, the students, and the community service organizations. I recognized that we were unlikely to be able to fund an independent nonprofit organization as Princeton did, so I approached representatives of the college, and over the next year and a half, we had numerous discussions. I finally contacted Carrie Clark, the counsel of the college, on a lawyer-to-lawyer basis, and he was particularly helpful in obtaining college approval for the program at the Tucker Foundation. At first, Alumni Relations was concerned that raising money for DPCS would have a negative impact on class fundraising. But DPCS was so well received by our class that our fundraising to the college actually grew, and more classmates got involved. Over the past nearly 24 years, DPCS has raised an endowment of over $1 million. We also realized that we needed to engage other classes so that DPCS would last beyond the class of '59. So we've added 20 other classes, representing a huge number of alumni. To date, over 800 students and 800 alumni mentors with each one of them have participated in the 10-week leave term internships with community service organizations serving the underserved around the country, from Alaska to Florida, California to New England. Organizations such as Harlem's Children's Zone, East Harlem School, Children's Aid Society, A Better Chance. 44 of my classmates and 2 spouses have mentored 172 interns in 20 states, which is an amazing record, I think. I hope this award will help inform students, alumni, and the college administration of the wonderful opportunities for service DPCS has provided and will continue to provide for students, alumni, and college. A couple of the interns, one of them said to me that the internship was the best 2 years of his life, and another one said that the internship had changed her life. So we've had an impact. It's been a great experience for me and my classmates, and we'll continue to provide for students and the alumni in the college. So thank you again.
Thank you, all of you. Now we get to my favorite part. So I am going to move over and turn into Oprah. This is the question and answer session, and I'll tell you how it works. There is a mic, I believe. Yep, Kara has a mic. So she will bring that mic to you so all of us can hear you. You want to keep your questions brief because I'm sure there will be many. You do want to ask questions. If you do not, I will ask all the questions. Please raise your hand and wait to be identified just in case we get a line of questions, which I know will happen. And then speak your questions right into the mic, because if you're like me, you do that. And we are recording this, so we want people to hear it even if they aren't here now, so that the mic is picking up all of the questions and your answers. So why don't we get going? Who will ask the first question? Don't be shy. I'm switching to my question list. Okay, I'll ask the first question. How do you see our current national climate impacting the work that you do?
Each time?
There's still a need for it. I think even more so today than before. No matter how much progress we make, there are still people that are underserved. There are still people that are underrepresented. There are still students that are underfunded. Unless we make an effort to help them, they will be lost. And if we lose our children and our youth, we've lost our future.
One of our missions with DPCS was to get the students and the alumni involved in this kind of work. And that's something that I think we've been successful with, and it's been very rewarding. You mentioned before having students come back and talk to alumni. We found that to be very effective. We get the interns to come back and talk to the alumni about what they've been doing, and it's been very good to encourage alums to be mentors and to support the program as well as financially.
Oh, wow. Well, the past 10 years, I've been working on getting a monument created to honor my great-grandmother, who was Itobe Wells. If you're not familiar with her, she was a journalist, a suffragist, a civil rights activist. And in Chicago, there was a housing community named after her, which has been torn down after 2002. And so that the idea of having a monument is to help people remember her in lieu of the fact that the housing community is gone. So the budget was $300,000 to have this monument created. The way that the political situation or our social situation today affects what I've been doing is kind of a double-edged sword, because it took a while to get, it was very challenging trying to raise the money for this monument because we started in 2008, which was the Great Recession. So people weren't very generous in supporting the project. As time has gone on, the political situation has changed, which has kind of helped our situation, because with all the Confederate monuments that have been, all the controversy regarding Confederate monuments and the heightened awareness of how few statues and monuments there are that actually show representation of minorities in general, but African American women in specific. Just so you know, there are about less than 20 statues around the country that are in the image of African American women. It's just really, really very underrepresented out of over 5,500 statues. So there you go. So in that way, the controversies regarding monuments has helped in a way, because as people become more aware of how underrepresented women are, then there's a higher likelihood that they're supporting what we're doing. So I actually managed to raise 2/3 of the money this year, well, 2018, because I was so aggressive about getting the word out regarding the lack of representation, in lieu of how people are so, this whole controversy with what is our history, who gets to be represented in public spaces, who owns the narrative. And so it has been sort of a supercharged way of gaining support for it. And then also what's happening in 2020, being the centennial of the 19th Amendment, there's a heightened awareness of how women fought for the right to vote, and who gets to tell that story when it comes to women's history. Now there's a lot of contention, and I'm on a rampage regarding that, on Black women being included in that story of the suffrage movement. Some people, there's a little bit of collective amnesia when it comes to that. In those two ways, the political situation really does affect what I'm doing.
I think for me, one of the major forces that I find creating a lot of problems in the work that I do is our social media and the immediate nonstop cycle of bombardment with news and information that folks have very little time to synthesize and to absorb, and I think that has exacerbated our ability to really connect to each other in ways that really almost displace reasoned civil discourse. And now it's a shouting match. It's just bumper sticker wisdom. You know, it's people just howling at each other. And I always think about our motto, you know, vox clamantis in deserto, and it's like, yeah, we're living it. It's a whole bunch of wild voices screaming in the wilderness. And, you know, for me, my passion comes from working with students and spending time with young people, helping them sort through not just the courses that I'm teaching. I see my job really as helping them sort through their lives and finding purpose and meaning in their lives. And the other day, there was this wonderful article, I think written actually by a Dartmouth alum, Gina Barreca, who's a professor down in Connecticut, class of '79, I think. And one of the things Gina said in her article, she called attention to the difference between loneliness, of which we see a spike in loneliness, and solitude. And this idea that, you know, the loneliness is really the bad thing. Both are forms of isolation. One is unintended, that you're feeling disconnected and removed. And even though you're connected, you know, you've got 1,000 friends, but they're not there really when you need them, right? It's a fiction, it's a fantasy. Where solitude is something you bring about on your own. You need a bit of a respite, and you need to take that time to reflect. And I find that a lot of our students don't have that or are not finding the time for solitude. There's a lot of loneliness on this campus. I see it every single day. Just this afternoon, I'm talking to a young man, first-year student, who said just a few weeks ago he walks into his room and broke down into tears because he's feeling totally isolated and lonely. So we spent most of our time talking about how do you find those moments to have the right kind of isolation, the solitude, where there can be refreshment, there can be perspective, there can be a regrounding, a rejuvenation of first principles. What brought you here? What keeps you going? Why do you get up every day? And those kinds of questions are not answerable in the kind of, you know, Twitter era and social media and all of that. So I worry that for all, if this is not a red or blue issue, I think for all of us, it's an issue about how do we continue to communicate across cultural barriers and create bridges for each other. I worry that we are not equipping our students well enough to be able to tackle that kind of issue. And if they can't do it in an interpersonal way, we're not going to do it when international relations are on the line in terms of being able to talk respectfully, even if we disagree. So for me, this is a very poignant, important issue for me.
Thank you. Thank you. I see a question, and I'm sick if I can remember the order. You're number 1, you're number 2, and you're number 3. So if we could get the mic to her.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you to you all for the work that you're doing, particularly right now in our current social moment. It is really important, obviously, but it also gives, it gives me a lot of hope, so thank you. Going off of your last answer, Professor, I was wondering how you all in your organizations and in your separate lives are able to create those discursive moments with individuals who you don't share views with, because particularly right now, I find that those conversations, they're not just about policy issues, they're about personhood. Yeah. And it's very hard to have a conversation with someone when they're not affirming someone else's rights.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. My approach generally when I have the opportunity is to do a bit of personal and emotional jujitsu, which is to turn it back to them and ask questions. You know, that's a very interesting perspective. Can you tell me why you believe that? Why do you hold that view? So that often changes the dynamic of the conversation. Now we're not talking about something that's disconnected from them. It's like, no, I want you to own what you just said. I want you to persuade me that this is what you feel in your DNA. And you're not just repeating something you heard on around the dinner table. These are not maybe your views. This is what someone rammed down your throat or what you think you have to say to either sound smart or provocative or whatever. And so it's a way to turn it back on them to say, no, I just want to hear the real, genuine you, because I'm not quite sure I'm hearing that. And that usually prompts a much more enlightened, focused, and sincere conversation. But that also means me communicating to that person that I'm taking the time to let them think and explain. No interruption, just let me hear you out. So it's a respect thing. It's like, I've asked a question, now I need to create the space for you to respond. If I'm yelling at someone, if I'm using my authority in a way that silences that student, that's not progress. That's not going to help that student grow into a different space. It's going to maybe either force them to go back and retrench, or get up on their heels, or respond in a way that doesn't help them. So I found that to be fairly successful.
Anyone else want to?
I'll just say really quickly, I don't come in contact with a whole lot of in-my-face kind of pushback, but I have had some people question why what I'm doing matters, and that kind of thing. And so I usually just come back with numbers and statistics and just say, like, okay, so if you think that, tearing down Confederate monuments is destroying your history, well, let's do the numbers. There are over 700 Confederate monuments in the country, and there are less than 50 monuments to African Americans. So why do you feel like you're being underrepresented? And I mean, it's like you have to, I just kind of counter with facts, and it's like nothing is being taken away from you by adding something else. Because if you feel like you need to be represented, why don't you think other people feel the same way?
Okay, we're going to come down. I think you're number 2.
I have a lot of questions, but Dr. Blackwell, I wondered if you could just talk about getting a law degree and what you hope to do with that, if there's something that inspired you that you plan to do with that. And Michele, I was very excited to see your relationship to Itobe Wells, and wonder if your choice of how you've approached things by your writing has been inspired by your relationship to her, and how did being a descendant of Itobe Wells influence your life? It's very curious to me.
She asked you first.
Okay. So my journey into law is a little interesting. So one of my partners decided she wanted to get her JD degree and become a lawyer. And so we rearranged our call schedule, and we allowed her to complete her degree in the evenings. And I thought, law is kind of interesting. And I was up for a challenge. So I knew I couldn't go to law school to become a lawyer. I had 3 daughters, a wife, I had a career, I was competing in track and field, all the other things that I was involved in.
He's a slacker.
So I thought I would I wanted to do, so I decided to do a master's degree, and it's a master's in health, law, compliance, and ethics. And it was really just a personal thing I wanted to do with myself. I think in medicine, we sometimes tend to get pigeonholed, and all we do is medicine, and we just use sort of one side of our brain. And so I know at some point I'm going to have to transition. I do not use the word retirement because I'm never going to retire. So what's my transition plan? So when I can't take that 2 a.m. morning call for an emergency, I should be able to do something else. And so I started off in this program, I wasn't quite sure I was going to be able to do it, and I was doing one class a semester, but it was something that was totally different. It used a different part of my brain. I was forced to learn how to be an internet student because we didn't have a classroom. So it was one of those things that just sort of brought me into a different generation, so to speak. It's one of many degrees that I want to attain before I transition. Yeah. So it was just.
She just said he wants to do business school next. Oh, God. Good luck.
So it was just a personal thing. It was just something it allows me to have options in the future.
I'm so curious. Is rest an option?
There'll be plenty of time to rest when I'm horizontal. Life's a journey, not a destination. And if you waste your time, you've lost your life.
Follow that up, Michele.
A couple of questions.
Good luck, you two.
Wow. Well, to try to quickly answer the question that I get quite often, is what's it like to be a descendant of Ida B. Wells, and how did it influence my life? I don't know anything different than being related to her, although I'm related to her on my father's side of the family, and my mother was very indignant during my entire life of making sure that we knew her side of the family, and her side of the family was just as important and just as impressive as my dad's side of the family. And so, I mean, my dad's side of the family was more obviously social justice oriented and civil rights oriented. My dad's side of the family has a high level of education. I'm the fourth generation college, which is unusual for African American families. My mom's side of the family grew up in rural America on a farm. But the thing about farmers, if you really think about it, is they're business people. And for several generations of my mother's side of the family to be self-sustaining farmers in an all-black community in Texas, my mom, constantly was like, hello, that's not an easy accomplishment. So I grew up, I think, balanced, and knowing that everybody's job is important, everybody's contribution is important, and I did not grow up thinking or being told that my great-grandmother is this deity and everybody else are, pagans or whatever. I mean, everybody was equal. I was never pressured to follow in her footsteps or do anything that she did. In fact, we were almost discouraged from it because my grandmother in particular knew it was a lot of pressure. And so we were always encouraged to do whatever we were interested in, whatever were our talents. I just happened to really enjoy writing, and it came easy to me. But I actually tried everything I could to not do what she did. And when I came to Dartmouth, I was on the radio instead of on the newspaper.
DJ.
Yeah, and I went into film school instead of journalism school. I mean, I was really fighting to not do what she did because I didn't want that comparison. But I don't know. I mean, I guess I can't help but just having strong opinions and wanting people to hear them.
Thank you. And while I'm contemplating getting rest once I'm horizontal, Doug, you had a question.
It's a tough question because you've all touched on this, but at lunch, we learned so much about you. And in different ways, from academic, medical, experiential, with the achievement, social impact story, your experience. But I feel like I'm missing that some principle, some spark that really says what direction you're doing that isn't planned. Is there a way that you can reflect, particularly you, where you're off doing a billion things? I didn't hear them, but I know you've done them. You've done them in different ways because you teach or whatever. So it's a hard question. I'm looking for that. What is the spark? What is the principle that moves you to be who you really are? Is it intentional or is it visceral?
I guess, is it what's inspiring? What is that key thing that inspires you, I think is what you're asking.
Well, for me, it's, I think I've always been, ever since I was young, I've been very curious, curious about the world, curious about people, and so that curiosity keeps me looking around the corner. I can see what's in front of me, but I'm actually kind of curious about what's over there that I can't see. And that actually was my my mantra, if you will, when I was a law professor. I used to tell my students, I taught at Vermont Law School for 17 years, and I said, my job, as I see my job, is to prepare you to be the lawyers for cases that haven't happened yet. Be able to look around the corner and say, are you going to be prepared to handle cases, the context for which doesn't even exist right now? And the example that I often gave was things like cyberbullying. You know, there were no computers when we were in law school. When I practiced law, the internet didn't exist, or maybe it did in the Department of War, or the Defense Department, but you know, it was not part of our reality. And now there are lawyers having to figure out what are the legal, how do you address the issues when a kid in California can bully a kid in Florida so badly that that kid commits suicide? How do we assign responsibility in that kind of world when the rules that we use were developed in merry old England, when folks lived in intimate villages? And so for me, that curiosity, that is the drive that says, yeah, we're constantly evolving, we're constantly adapting, we're constantly putting ourselves in different arenas to do good, but also to do bad things. We've learned new ways to hurt each other. We've also learned new ways to assist each other. And I've always been very, so that's the curiosity part that drives me to do there. But the fire within me is what was lit with my family, which is really just, this is the priest coming out, to live out the gospel of love. It's sort of, for me, it boils down to, I need to find a way to connect because deep down, I want to love and I want to be loved. And so I want to figure out, if I understand you, if I understand what's happening to you, if I understand how the world is changing in a really dramatic way, we better be prepared for this because we're going to fall apart as social beings if we haven't learned and practiced the way to love. So for me, that's the driver, the L word.
You want to list all of them?
It's up to you, because one of the things that I do for each class of awardees, before you leave, I give you a promise from our community.
A what?
A promise from our community. Yeah. And I do it every single year. So if there are no more comments in response to that, I need to make sure you get that promise before you leave, before we go out for the reception.
Michael has a question.
I'd like to say something on behalf of, I represent one of the class of '59. When we proposed this program, the Dartmouth Partners in Community Service, most of us had pretty much achieved in our professional careers about getting. We got our lives, we got our children raised, we earned decent money. And I think we came to a realization that it's a time to give. And when I grew up in the 40s and 50s, I had no awareness, no one who sort of led me to know about giving back and social service. And I think the message that we're trying to give is that we have a great responsibility And we have a great need within ourselves to help others who are less fortunate than we are. And it comes down to being individually involved. We started as a class, but I think the number of our classmates who joined us in this program and the number of classmates from other classes who have joined us have come to realize the great satisfaction of being able to help and assist others who are not as fortunate as we are. And I think if we're going to solve any of this, I mean, I think back to what our country was like in 1959 when we graduated and how much we thought had changed so that we didn't have these social issues. But under current conditions and looking ahead for my grandchildren, I'm appalled at what's happening in our society. I think each of us has to get involved individually. And it doesn't matter what you do, a little thing or a big thing. As the doctor said, if you touch one life, that's one life that would never have been touched before. And I know when I got involved with a group called Children's Aid, I was working with inner city children. And I spoke to the head of Children's Aid, and I said, Phil, I said, I'm so frustrated. I put in so much time, invest a lot of money. I don't see a return on my investment looking at it as a businessman. And he said, Michael, what does one person mean to you if you've changed their life? And I came to realize that if we can do that, we can accomplish a lot. And I think that's what this is all about.
And I think that's appropriate that I do tell you what my promise, and the promise that I make to you is a promise from this community that you take with you so that you are inspired, continue to be inspired and share that inspiration with others. So your promise from us to you for 2019 is that we promise to practice compassion, not indifference. We promise to practice courage, not cowardice in the face of injustice. We promise to practice understanding, not self-righteousness. And we promise to practice welcoming our fellow human beings with open arms, not with closed minds. So please join us in the lobby so we can continue to celebrate and welcome our guests. Thank you.